Well, for more on how the dark web gave rise to cryptocurrencies and how that market has exploded in recent months, I'm joined from Montreal by Francis Pouliot, co-founder of Catalaxy and CEO of Satoshi Portal. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Now, start by giving us some background. There are digital currencies, virtual currencies, and cryptocurrencies. As people try and navigate this space, break down the key differences for us.
I'm going to break down the difference between Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and ICOs, which is a little bit different than the question you asked. But it's important to look at those technologies and their fundamental value propositions. So Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency there is. Its fundamental value is to be a decentralized, peer-to-peer monetary and financial system, which allows its users to have financial sovereignty, which enables censorship-resistant transactions, and which also has a unit which is fixed in supply. And in that way, the first use cases, the obvious use case of Bitcoin is to be digital cash, because it is a bearer asset, and also digital gold, because it is a store of value. Other cryptocurrencies are, such as Ethereum, Monero, and Zcash, are competing with Bitcoin on other properties that it has. For example, some of them may be more private or anonymous, and some of them may have more complicated smart contract functionalities. And then you all have the other class of new assets, which is ICOs. ICOs are much more similar to traditional equity crowdfunding projects. These are businesses that are issuing tokens in order to raise money and offer a product of service. So you have Bitcoin, which is kind of the global decentralized trust layer. You have the other cryptocurrencies, which are innovating on different features. And you have the ICOs, which are just, most of them are traditional companies, which are just using blockchain technology in the back end in order to make their offerings and provide some kind of a value for the shareholders.
Now, cryptocurrencies haven't had the best reputation, especially given their origins. But how is the activity we're seeing on the dark web impacting the views that we're seeing now on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
Well, it's a good question, because a lot of people thought that Bitcoin became, in 2012, in its early beginnings, the currency of the dark web because it was anonymous. And we know today that that's not the case. It's only because Bitcoin transactions are censorship resistant. So put yourself in the shoes of someone which wants to do something on the dark web back in 2012. They simply can't have a PayPal account or a bank account or a Visa account because they don't own the funds there. These transactions can be censored. The funds can be seized. So it's not necessary that Bitcoin was anonymous. It's mostly that it was the only option available because it was the only option that could not be censored. So obviously, at that time, early on, the risks of using the technologies were very high because it was very uncertain. So it's normal for me that it was the most risk-seeking people that decided to go after Bitcoin first. Today, obviously, the darknet usage of Bitcoin is a very tiny, tiny fraction of the Bitcoin use. So it's kind of growing pains that, of course, in the beginning, the nefarious use, just like the internet, is going to be the most prevalent one. But as this technology becomes adopted by the mainstream and traditional institutions, of course, these use cases kind of fall into the minority.
So then, as we're seeing it more widely adopted, what are some of the main uses that we're seeing for cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin?
The obvious two uses are transactional. So Bitcoin is particularly useful for creating trustless transactions. They can be simple transfers of money, but these transactions can also be programmed with smart contracts, and they can be audited, they can be self-validated, they have a lot of features. So transactional is obviously a very important use case. The other one is really the aspect of digital gold and being an uncorrelated asset class, which is completely separate from traditional asset classes, which are mostly secured by banks such as bonds and stocks. So you have the currency, Bitcoin, and kind of transactional payment system, which is very smart. And you also have this currency and asset, which is uncorrelated, limited in supply, and which follows the principles of sound money, which is more attractive to the investors and long-term speculators.
Now, a lot of people initially thought that Bitcoin was a blip that wouldn't last, but it continues to climb towards that $5,000 mark. We're seeing a lot more credibility given from different countries, and even countries considering their own version of it. What's driving this momentum, though, beyond speculation?
Well, there's two main factors. There's the factors within Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself has a dynamic and evolving technology roadmap. It's an open source project, and there's a lot of new features introduced in Bitcoin. The most recent and notorious is called segregated witness, which enabled us to build very complicated and scalable payment networks on top of Bitcoin. So from the inside of the community, the technology roadmap is going very well. The other factor is, of course, Bitcoin is an alternative. It is reactionary to existing systems. So if you look at, for example, what's going on with interest rates, what's going on with market manipulation, there's this idea that, yes, people say that Bitcoin is a bubble, but people say that also traditional asset classes are also as a bubble. So you have these global macro conditions which are really tied to Bitcoin. This is why, for instance, when you look at geopolitical trouble between Japan and North Korea, for example, you will see the prices of traditional assets in that region go down and Bitcoin go up. So this is one of its main features right now going forward. The fact that these macro events really feed into the narrative that it's uncorrelated and that it's independent.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Francis Pouliot, co-founder of Catalaxy and CEO of Satoshi Portal.